I've decided to do this final episode on the meaning of specific words a little differently. Luther's theological calling card, Justification by Faith Alone, came out of his reading of the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. But before you can really appreciate what happened to Luther when he discovered that doctrine, you need to understand some of the other foundational theological definitions Luther had. In the preface to his lectures on Romans, Luther wrote the following.
To begin with, we must have knowledge of its language and know what St. Paul means by the words law, sin, grace, faith, righteousness, flesh, spirit, and the like. Otherwise, no reading of the book has any value.
In this episode, we're going to talk about what Luther understood to be commonly confused words and concepts for Christians, the distinction between flesh and spirit. The key to Luther's understanding is recognizing that spiritual matters are not something in the ether, so to speak, and matters pertaining to the flesh can be dedicated to religious piety and practices. In other words, flesh and spirit are likely not what most Christians think they are. Let's listen to Luther.
Flesh and spirit you must not understand as though flesh is only that which has to do with unchastity and spirit is only that which has to do with what is inwardly in the heart.
Rather, like Christ in John 3:6, Paul calls everything flesh that is born of the flesh, the whole man, with body and soul, mind and senses, because everything about him longs for the flesh. Thus, you should learn to call him fleshly too, who thinks, teaches, and talks a great deal about lofty spiritual matters, yet does so without grace. When you pay close attention to what Luther is saying, you can see that he's addressing what he calls in other places the nature of the old Adam. The old Adam is caught in a cycle of self-centered preservation, so much so that even spiritual and religious activities are done with the intentions and the hopes that one will gain some personal benefit. Thus, praying, fasting, and devotions are done as a means of bartering or making amends with God. Why or how can this happen? It's due to the fact that the promise of Christ's mercy has not taken root in the heart and conscience. Therefore, seemingly religious and spiritual things are done in an attempt to fulfill the law of God. Then, Luther flips the paradigm when talking about the spiritual aspects of life. Listen again to Luther.
On the contrary, you should call him spiritual who is occupied with the most external kind of works, as Christ was when he washed the disciples' feet, and Peter when he steered his boat and fished. Thus, the flesh is a man who lives and works inwardly and outwardly in the service of the flesh's gain and of this temporal life. The spirit is the man who lives and works inwardly and outwardly in the service of the spirit and the future life.
Well, just as the old Adam is insecure about his current existence, focused on self-preservation, when Christ's promise enters the ear and grabs the conscience, the heart of the Christian turns outward in service toward others. So, to give you a sense of how this distinction plays out in today's context, a person who goes on a spiritual retreat or does some meditation or a prayer labyrinth would be considered fleshly by Luther if it's for one's own personal gain and benefit. Whereas a farmer who's plowing the field so as to help feed others, or a seamstress making a dress for someone, or a parent changing a baby's diaper, all of these would be spiritual when they're focused not on oneself and any personal benefit, but on benefiting those who are in need. So, while all Christians use words like flesh and spirit, we certainly do not all mean the same thing, but our theological understandings will have a profound impact on the way we define these words and others, even words as seemingly simple as flesh and spirit.
You're early. The next episode hasn't started yet. I need some time to prepare and finish my coffee.